World's largest outdoor cocktail party week is here. Annual Georgia, Florida. Great returns guest Daniel from the Gator Truth podcast. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back. Is this 4 years in a row or just three?
Might be three, but great return guest. Always good to have you on. Got some big time news coming up. I'm sure everybody's can't wait to hear your thoughts on Billy Napier and everything. We'll jump into that. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, share the Doghouse podcast. Really help us out coming off a bye week. Also, Jordan Fick, the guest from last week, decathlete, track and field star for Georgia. That was great to have him on and hear his whole journey. Pretty cool. Decathlete, 10 events. Very impressive.
It's very
Way better
impressive.
than what I could do now. I did like 3 5Ks in my life. I'm good.
Much less 10 different sports at once or whatever.
Yeah, very impressive. All right, Daniel, what everybody was waiting on. So it's 2 weeks since Billy Napier got fired. Is that correct?
At the time of the recording, yeah, about 8-9 days.
Gotcha. And not Georgia, Florida did get the win over Mississippi State, so he did go out with a win. But you're a diehard Florida Gator fan. Your initial thoughts: were you relieved, disappointed? What was your reaction, and what's next? And also, we can talk about some candidates, or if you have a wish list.
Yeah, to be honest, when he was let go, I'll be honest. When we beat Mississippi State in the way that we did, a lot of people would say, and I said in the stadium to the guys around me, it was really a Billy Napier bingo game because there were a lot of just tendencies he had, whether it was him blowing time management or deciding, you know, crazy things like on in that game, the last third down the Gators have, you've been able to run the ball in Mississippi State all day. So what are you going to do on 3rd and 1? You're going to do a rollout pass. And it was like anything you could think of that's Billy Napier's style that could drive you crazy. It was, just happened in that game, for good, for bad, but also as a person. Billy Napier is a good guy. So getting the win in like the most improbable way ever, which of course is a defensive tackle dropping into zone and making a pick on a ball that's technically thrown behind him. Like he has to reach behind him and make that pick. It was the perfect way to go out. I mean, the first game he had, I don't know how many Georgia fans know this, but the first game he had against Utah was another similar situation, which was just like USF this year, where you score or you punt, whatever the case may be. Other team marches down the field, and with less than a minute, 2 minutes left, you get an improbable interception to seal the game. I mean, that's how his time at Florida started, and it ends with a defensive tackle interception. With that said, I thought maybe, okay, we're going to keep them through the bye week, which means we should keep them through the rest of the year, which I don't think would have been good for anybody, uh, because there was a growing discontentment. Of course, there are the Fire Billy chants in the stadium against Mississippi State. And I'm sure if he stays on through the bye week, and then if he goes to Jacksonville and loses, or loses in Lexington, or then the week after um, we're in Oxford against Ole Miss. By the time we come back home, we could have 1, 2, 3 more losses. So you have a rivalry game against Tennessee, and no one's focused on the game. They're more focused on, just the anger that's been built up. And I was hoping not to see that again because Billy's a great guy. And so, in a way, letting him go when they did was perfect. He got to walk out a winner. You also got to relieve some of the tension in the fan base. Of course, now, like you alluded to, there's lots more questions about what's next. But you also have the bye week to let all the players, kind of work through their emotions on the coaching change, especially our fifth-year seniors who have now been through 2 coaching changes and will be, and I've said this on our podcast, the class of seniors with the worst winning percentage since at least the 40s at the University of Florida. So to give them a chance, to go out winners and just change a few things and not have their last 2 games, possibly be what they could be, I think it was good timing. I've come on playing podcasts. I'm pretty sure I've said on yours before the season, Billy Napier had to get to 9 wins. And then once he, to stay at Florida, in my opinion, once he got to that 4th loss, that's where I was like, okay, I'm out. I'll give him till that. I know a lot of people wanted him out after USF or after LSU or Miami, all of which were winnable games, and they let him off the hook. But then the Texas A&M game, I think that's just where it was like, okay, we're done.
So Daniel, are you relieved as a Florida Gator fan, and you're ready to rip the Band-Aid off and start over? Are you happy with that?
I am, as someone, and I actually found tweets on my personal account that I'd sent in 2021, which was, I believe, is November 21st, 2021, after it was kind of rumored we were picking up Napier. And I said, is anyone worried about a guy whose offense is ranked 80th and has a bunch of 1-score wins, including slap boxing with a bad FCS team? And my biggest hope, and I said it many times throughout the years, is he needs an offensive coordinator. And I got so much flack the first year, less flack the second year. After last year, there's a rumor he was going to be forced to hire an offensive coordinator. He didn't, but he did announce for the second year in a row a promotion of a guy with the title offensive coordinator. And I believe I said on the show in the preseason that my hope is that you don't make that announcement 2 years in a row and not see fingerprints. Well, that's on me for, trying to apply logic to the situation. And ultimately, that's why I would say I feel relief is I don't have to go out there and basically be able to call the game outside of the scripted drives, from my seat in the stadium, where it's like, okay, we're in pistol. There's a 90% chance of run. Oh, the running back's offset. This is a 75% chance of a pass. And then also, like, if we're going outside, we're probably running to the short side of the field, versus when you run outside, it's to get space and you'd want to do it to the long side of the field. But again, things like that, I could go on for days, but the short answer for relief is yes.
Good deal. And then, so as a Georgia fan, of course, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm sure you hear it all. He always had the name Sunbelt Billy. And do you think the hire, he was a little over his head? And also, I wanted to ask, hindsight's 2020. Do you think it was a little premature the way this turned out, that you let go of Dan Mullen too quickly, looking back on it?
All right. For the first one, Sunbelt Billy comment, I don't know how much your listeners or even you may know, but we had a staffer, Jacob LaFrance, who worked under Billy, and I think he's still in the department, although it'd be smart to have let him go by now, who decided after the Texas win to come after Florida fans for the Sunbelt Billy comments and put some stuff on Twitter about it. Mm-hmm. It got deleted. And then he might have been caught. I can't verify, but I can tell you what I've seen. And that's a lot of people found a burner account who seemed to be defending him a lot. And then when they addressed it by his name, suddenly that burner account is deactivated. So leave that there. And that's pretty much the feeling on the Sunbelt Billy. Was he in over his head? I wouldn't say that. I think if he just didn't have the feeling of, I'm the best play caller in the nation, despite there being no track record for that, if he would have sat back, because he had no problem making changes to the defensive staff and doing things to get that side of the ball better, and it's been better. But he wasn't going to touch his friends on the offensive side, including giving up his, play calling duties. So I think, if not for the pride, the pride or the ego of, hey, I'm the best at this, when it's like, nah, you call like 60th in the nation scoring offense. I think he would be fine. So I wouldn't say he was necessarily in over his head, but I would say that there are things he did to prevent growth and adaptability that kept him out. And on to the Dan Mullen question, I'm one of the people who'll say, no, it wasn't premature. It's easy to go back hindsight and see what the hiring of Billy, but the problem was who you hired and not vetting another candidate. It really was our AD, Scott Strickland, zeroing in on Billy Napier and saying, this is a guy, we're going to do all this insane stuff. Like, here's a contract with no offset or duty to mitigate clause. It was a bad hire in lots of regards and things like that. But that doesn't take away that Dan Mullen had a worse record against top teams than Ron Zook. I actually wrote something up on a Florida message board that's still there about it. He had a great record, but he also didn't face anyone. Comparatively, Billy faced a lot more teams that were ranked, but also Dan Mullen in the 2021 season I don't want to say totally, but stopped really recruiting, stopped caring as much, and it really was going downhill. And he was basically forced during the season to fire his good friend, offensive line coach, and his defensive coordinator, Todd Grantham, who Georgia fans are very, very well familiar with.
Third and Grantham, good riddance.
Exactly. Dan Mullen did not want to get rid of him, despite it potentially, keeping Florida from a national championship in 2020. Terrible defense where we went toe to toe with everybody until the bowl game where we, kind of didn't have half our team, but that's a different story. Didn't practice, didn't prepare according to the players, not according to fans, according to the players. We didn't really practice or prepare for Oklahoma that game. Like after that, and then he didn't get an NFL job like he was hoping. It just went downhill. So in hindsight, it's easy to say, well, he had lots of wins. He was better than James Franklin, which I'm sure we'll get to that later against top teams. But I wouldn't say it was much better. And then by the end of it, actually, it was the world's largest outdoor cocktail party that kind of, in part, spelled the end for Dan Mullen when Kirby Smart was talking about recruiting and how important it was. And then fellow Gator podcaster Dave Waters, Gators Breakdown, shout out to them, asked Dan Mullen a question, trying to throw him a softball, asked, kind of a recruiting question to kind of hit back towards what Kirby had said. And Dan Mullen famously said, we'll talk about recruiting during recruiting season. Then they got blown out by a bad South Carolina team the next week. Then he was forced to fire Grantham and his offensive line buddy, who works at Lowe's now. That's not a joke. Actually does work at Lowe's. And then that week after the firings, Samford puts 52 on us at home. Not Stanford, Samford, the Bulldogs. FCS team puts 52 on us at home. We still win. Then we lose to Missouri on a 2-point conversion play in overtime. And then he's let go. And then we beat FSU with a interim to finish out that year. But the trajectory under Mullen was going the wrong way. But I figured I'd give all the different ins and outs and context for those that may not remember all the craziness going on at Florida, but it was definitely part of that. The recruiting during recruiting season comments, and that's partially leading into Billy Napier. They're looking for a great recruiter, which Billy Napier was considered to be, and that kind of led into the single-minded focus towards Napier. So that's how we've ended up where we are in 2025.
That's right. Thanks for the breakdown. Yeah, that's really good. Before we get into the top candidates that Daniel would like, or even the rumors, going to give a shout out to our sponsor, VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. Great for the golf course, even though it's cold and rainy out. It was great for tailgate, but check them out. 0 carb, 0 sugar. Personal favorites, the watermelon. Also have huckleberry, elderberry, grapefruit. But for 20% off Doghouse 20, again, that's 20% off Doghouse 20. VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. Check them out on their YouTube page, is growing, and also on YouTube as well. Great sponsor of the podcast. All right, Daniel. Sure, 2 weeks to kind of breathe and let it all sit in. But who are we hearing besides Lane Kiffin? Because I know his phone's blowing up, and we'll talk about that too after Brian Kelly getting fired. Who would you like to have? Who's on your short list? Who is realistic? Also, $20 million buyout for Billy Napier. And just where's everything for the Gators sitting on the coaching search?
Well, I'm going to start with that last bit about the $20 million buyout. And I alluded to it earlier. I mentioned it, no offset clause, no duty to mitigate. For those that are not attorneys or not familiar with that phrase, and offset clause is, hey, I'm owed $20 million from the University of Florida. However, if I get a job at the University of Georgia tomorrow and they pay me, $2 million a year, that means with an offset clause, that $2 million is not owed by Florida, because that way you're not double dipping the money, essentially. A duty to mitigate means you've got to try and get a job or, within reason. And there's all sorts of examples that could give about what would be or not be reasonable. James Franklin has a duty to mitigate. My understanding is Brian Kelly has a duty to mitigate, where Billy Napier does not. So if he wants to take his $20 million, not work for the next 5 years and just get paid by the University of Florida, granted he has 3 years left on the contract, but Plan Money did not really worry about working for quite a while. He got off the hook scot-free, where some of these other coaches, man, you've got to try and make money somehow and reduce the buyout. So not good on Florida there. Obviously Lane Kiffin. I know you said beyond Lane Kiffin. Who would I want? Who do I don't want? A name, if we got beyond Lane Kiffin, that I personally would be interested in, or two names. Right now, number one, and I know a lot of Florida fans are going to crush me for this one, so that's why I'm going to say it first, is I really like what Rhett Lashley has done. Granted, not super experienced. I believe he's only been a head coach 2-3 years, or this is his third season. But what he's done at SMU, Arkansas grad, he's coached at Miami. He's familiar with the Southeast and the expectations that come from some of these, some of the big schools, and also familiar with really what the expectations are in the Southeast area, whether it's SEC, ACC, whatever it may be. And I mean, this is a guy that's won 11 games a year the first 2 years at SMU, won as a G5 in the All-American Conference, and last year doesn't skip a beat when they move up to the ACC in a Power 5 conference, and takes them, to the playoffs. Granted, some of that G5 remaining ends up not quite getting the job done in State College. But hey, I mean, I think overall what he's done at a place like SMU, this is not a place that really has been great for decades. I think that's something that Florida may want. I believe we should go with, and this is my number one. I probably should have led with this. My number one thing I want is a coach that's dedicated to a modern, high-powered passing attack, and that's what we see at SMU. Because the last four hires, even Dan Mullen, were more about let's ground and pound it out. Dan Mullen, you look at 18, 19, 21, he's more about running that QB, where in 2020 with Kyle Trask, it didn't work too well in 2019. So he kind of had to change up the offense. Had a great passing attack, goes back to 2019 offense right after that. In 2021 doesn't do well, but Florida's been best, as Georgia fans know, from the 1990s and Ron Zook years, and some of the Meyer years. Sorry, I had to. When you do spread it out, throw the ball quite a bit, And that's what I think Lashley does. And another guy who does that quite well, a guy who was a grad assistant for Steve Spurrier, that's Jed Fish at Washington. He's was at Florida grad, went to Arizona, didn't have a great first year, but then jumps up to, I believe, 5-6 wins year 2, then 10 wins, which I heard someone say in the last few days, it was only the second time Arizona had won like 10 games in decades, possibly ever. So you see the growth there. Then he jumps to Washington the year after, they win, or not win, but make it to a national championship game, win in the playoffs to get to a national championship game with Penix and all that. Then they lose DeBoer. Half the team was portal and graduated. And so he takes over, basically the leftovers at Washington, as it's also jumping to the Big Ten. And first year, lots of transition, not that great, but currently this year, I believe they're 6-2 and doing well. And I think if it's not Lane Kiffin, he's another guy, great offense, has shown he can build programs up at lower, programs that comparatively in the conference, Arizona, is not in the Pac-12 or in the Big 12 now, not exactly what anyone would call an A-tier conference school. Same thing with Washington, where we know Florida, with the right coach, can be an A-tier program in the SEC. So it'd be interesting to see those two. As far as two names I don't want, I am neutral on Eli Drinkowitz. That name has come up. There are Florida fans that talk about they'll Greg Schiano if Drinkwitz is named coach at Florida. I'm not in that boat, but if you remember what Tennessee fans did when Schiano was hired there, and if you're saying I don't remember him on the sidelines, yeah, that's why. Look it up. But there are fans saying that about Drinkwitz. Again, I don't feel that way. I think he would be a okay hire. As far as names I've heard that I wouldn't want, Brent Key, see my number one thing about wanting a passing attack. Also, he gets away with a lot of one-score games. We just did that with Billy Napier. Doesn't mean he couldn't be successful here, but in the SEC, you're not going to survive if most of your games are one-score games and you're relying on a coin flip and a small margin of error. Again, we've just seen that experiment at Florida. The other name is James Franklin. There are people that love, on my Twitter that love saying, hey, Franklin would be great here. A, he was just fired for a reason. B, that 4-21 against AP top 10 teams. Yeah. And Penn State, whether and actually have a whole episode about coaching candidates that I have not posted because my Franklin takes will probably tick plenty of Gators off. But Penn State, you can't tell. I mean, Trey, tell me if I'm wrong. Outside of Ohio State and Michigan, is there, before expansion, would you say there's another A level or a team above Penn State in the pecking order in general in the Big Ten?
Now, they were always the third team. They were that 9-10 win consistent team, but couldn't get over the hump. And I just think Penn State fans are tired of it. Kind of like Mark Richt during the Georgia years. 9-10 win program every year. You knew what you were going to get. Lose to the big boys, Michigan, Ohio State. You're that third team. You're the bronze medalists, and they were tired of it.
Right. And I don't think him coming to Florida, with the general offensive issues that he's had throughout his time at Penn State, but also coming to Florida, you don't just have two major teams you're competing with. Again, talking about before expansion, you're going to have Alabama, you're going to have Georgia, LSU, Tennessee, also possible fights with right now Missouri or Vandy or A&M or Texas. And it's such a deeper conference in the SEC. So if I see a guy who's 4-21, there are people saying, imagine what we could do with the better talent at Florida. I'm like, yes, but the SEC is better. The coaches in the SEC are better top to bottom than they were in the Big Ten. I don't see him suddenly becoming a national championship level coach in a tougher conference. Does that seem unfair of me to say, Trey?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Also, I'm gonna go with another question, and I'm gonna throw a couple of candidates out there. I guess reading real quick what I think would be good is all right. So you got, and then these contracts are crazy. So 49 to James Franklin, 54 to Brian Kelly, 20 for you guys to Napier. I know everybody's doing pretty well, but how about financially? How are the Gators doing? And then what kind of like salary package can you offer this next coach? And you got to buy the coaching staff and you got NIL. So, like, how competitive is it going to be? One of these you guys can back up the Brinks truck, as they say, and throw a whole bunch of money, or where are you guys at financially? I have no idea. Just wondering.
Well, I can answer this a fun way, and I can give the answer as well. The fun way I've got to do. Just make sure we tag our friends at Plant the Spear. Financially, we're doing much better than Florida State University is right now.
Okay, I like it.
Who could barely afford to buy out Willie Taggart in 2019 and now has a much bigger buyout on their hands and is still paying off a stadium project. Meanwhile, Florida definitely has the money. And I can tell you, if you were, for example, if you were to get a Lane Kiffin, you're going to get a lot more buy-in from boosters. You're going to feel there's going to be a lot more excitement around the program. And also with the hopes of a stadium renovation coming up in 2027, if Scott Strickland wants that money, he's going to make a big splash hire at this point because we've gone kind of the cheap route. Whether I'm not saying Will Muschamp was cheap, that wasn't a terrible hire, but then Jim McElwain, wasn't the best hire as time has shown. Dan Mullen was definitely not the first choice. And then only going to Billy Napier again at the time, probably not the worst idea, but there are things you didn't do that you should with that hire. But with that said, there are plenty of people that I've seen, and we're talking hundreds that have talked about they would up or start giving to NIL. I can tell you, I know plenty of people personally that stopped doing Florida's collective last year when it was announced Billy Napier was being kept another year before the Texas game. They're like, okay, if you're not serious about it, we're not going to fund it. And so right now there's lots of talk of, hey, you get this fan base excited. This is a fan base that you said, hey, we need, millions of dollars to build a standalone football facility. And you got it in droves. As I said years ago about, NIL and return on investment, I've never seen the Florida fan base not get to a point where Florida said we need X amount of money for X to happen and it not happen. And we've seen that in plenty of things. So I'm not worried about Florida's financial situation. I think, hiring a big coach will be a lot easier to get stuff. Now, on the flip side, let's say Florida hires what I believe, and there are plenty of people who believe is an uninspiring James Franklin hire. It'll be curious to see what happens because some people say yes, some people say no. But there's also the question, well, since he was just fired, do you have leverage to say, you know what, we're going to not pay you the 10, or I've seen reports of Lane Kiffin possibly being offered $13-15 million a year. I don't know how true those are, but instead of paying high numbers, going to Franklin, who's a failed coach, like you said, he was Mark Richt. He's not giving over the hump, and now you're bringing him to a harder conference and saying, we'll pay you $2 million a year, but it can get up to $20 million with incentives, and almost change how NCAA coach contracts work. I don't know. I don't know if he would go for that, but that is one thing I've said. Okay, if we do that, then incentivize it. Don't make him the highest paid coach in the SEC.
Got to prove it.
Yeah, exactly. You go to the SEC title game here. Here's an extra $1 million. You go to playoffs. Here's, $2 million, whatever it is, works out. Each thing, of course, gets you, and you'll be the highest paid coach by far if you win everything. But yeah, it's based on that. But yeah, as far as the finances, I know I've gone into, again, a lot more detail than I need to, but yeah, I think Florida's great with finances. The question is, how motivated will be you see, even it's that, 2,000 boosters, they're just donating $15 a month or something to the collective that aren't giving now. That's still a pretty penny for NIL. That's a pretty nice backup at like, was that 15 times 2, 30,000, 360,000. That might be a few good backups that you need. Obviously not a star player, but that's a quite a chunk amount. And again, that's just quick math, and there could be people that give a lot more. I'm just trying to, throw easy numbers out there.
Yeah, appreciate that breakdown. Real quick, I'm going to throw, before we preview the cocktail party, a couple of names that I thought would be interesting or get your thoughts. So how about Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, because they're winning. Big time win last week. Also had game day. And then also, how about, hopefully I say his name right, USF, because he's already in Florida. I'm sure he's got ties. Alex, is it Golsif? Is that how you pronounce it?
Alex Golish.
Golish. What do you think about
Yes.
those two? I'm getting this from Fox Sports, Joel Klatt, who I like him. He's neutral.
Yeah.
That's a couple of names. Anyway, thoughts on those? I know there's going to be a lot of speculation, but those kind of stood out.
All right. I'm sorry. What was that first name? I know you said it, and I was thinking about Golish so much that
Clark Lee at Vanderbilt.
Clark Lee, yes.
They're winning. Just had a big win game day, beat Missouri. Probably going to make the playoffs, looking like it anyway. Big name. Vanderbilt, that'll definitely be Florida to be a step up.
Yeah.
Even though it's SEC.
Oh yeah.
Young guy.
I'm interested in Clark Lee a little bit. The question is that I have is how much of it is Clark Lee? How much of it is going and getting Pavia from New Mexico State? Is it repeatable? And that's where, because we've seen his first few seasons before he brought in, Pavia killing the New Mexico State guys. Mm-hmm. They were not good. And then they've jumped up with them, and it's great. The question is it repeatable? And what I contrast that with is, like I mentioned, Jed Fish. You saw him build up Arizona, leave, and now he's building up Washington. So you've seen that. It does intrigue me. I'm not sure if it would move the fan base. And another thing that's interesting there is the dynamic of Clark Lee is doing this at Vanderbilt, where he's from. Do you want to take a guy from his home, which is also my thoughts on Jeff Brom, who I've not mentioned, but that's a name that some in the Gator community have brought up, who of course is at home as an alumni at Louisville. So Clark Lee, definitely an interesting thing. I don't think he's a top 5 candidate on the mythical list, but definitely someone to be considered. And then Alex Golish, I don't see Florida going to the G5 this year or this cycle after they just did that. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. Golish has been up and down at USF, having a great year this year. Obviously beat Florida, then turned around and got absolutely annihilated at Miami. And but then went to North Texas, had a great game, especially an awesome second half, and then lost at Memphis. Would he be a top 5 guy? No. Would he be near like 9 or 10? Possibly. Interesting names, but I think for Florida, it's about, hey, there's a lot of waning and the big boosters, what they want to do. And if we want to get our name project out there with this stadium renovation, and we're going to be asking for, tens of millions of dollars, is that going to be a name that's going to make people want to donate to us, or are they going to save that for a possible buyout? If another G5 comes in here and fails, just like we've seen with McElwain and Billy in the last 10 years. So I don't know. I just don't think either of those two are near the top of Scott Strickland's list. And I say that as he says he's using a search firm as well, whatever that means.
Gotcha. Very interesting insight. Appreciate you sharing that, Daniel. Looks like you are a Rhett Lashley fan from SMU. I know we mentioned a lot, but I guess that would be one that would make you happy.
Yeah, definitely Jed Fish would make me happy. But of course, the big one that we're not going into depth because we all know about it, and that's Oklahoma letting us down last week. And that's, of course, Lane Kiffin. Of course, we have the funniest thing that could happen in 2 weeks when we visit Oxford if somehow we pulled the upset. But that's a different discussion for a different time, I'm sure.
There you go. All right, big time matchup. World's largest outside cocktail party. Going to be the last time in Jacksonville before the renovation. That's all interesting. But we got Georgia versus Florida. Florida versus Georgia. Either which way you look at it. 7.5 point spread. 3:30 as usual. ABC. Thoughts on this game? Both coming off a bye week. I think it's going to go two ways. I think Florida is going to come out spirited. Was it Tony Gonzalez? Is that the interim?
Billy Gonzalez.
I'm sorry, Billy Gonzalez. They're going to come out spirited, new look, going to really fight for the new coach, play hard, or they're going to lay down and struggle. And you guys are, there was even somebody mentioning like, hey, you might have some of the players getting poached by some of the other programs. Either way, got to respect this game, rivalry game, throw it out of the books. DJ Lagway struggled this year, but Georgia seems like they take a nap in the first half. I could actually see Florida, as usual, taking the lead on this game, and then Georgia. The joke is the game starts at 3:30. Georgia players show up at 5. So I hope they can switch that up. Gunnar Stockton coming off a great game against Ole Miss. Or even throw him in there in the Heisman conversation. I think you need to see more of that. But 10 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's been running around really good. O-line is healthy. Finally, I believe we're going to have our starters all back. We did lose Colby Young, broke his leg or fibula, whatever it is, in the Ole Miss game. That was a blow. Secondly, receiver. We're running the ball really well. But you got to give it to Florida. They are scrappy this year. Really good defense. And Ba has been really explosive recently. Georgia is good against the run, but they still scare me in the secondary. Secondary hasn't been great this year. So, Daniel, what's your thoughts? And give us a preview and prediction. What do you think how the mindset's going to be with Florida coming in off the Billy Napier firing?
The interesting thing is every Florida fan is very curious to what's going to happen in this game as far as, like you said, are they going to come in laying down or are they going to come out on fire? I do think that in a way they're going to come out on fire. Billy Gonzalez has been on staff. I believe this is his 12th season in the last 20-ish seasons for the Gators. He was with Urban Meyer up until he may or may not have gotten into a fight with a guy named Percy Harvin. Not sure if anyone's heard of him. Then he left for LSU, was at LSU for a while with Les Miles, came back to Florida with Dan Mullen, was gone for a year, and Kerry Colbert leaves for the NFL. And Billy Napier's like, hey, Billy Gonzalez, you're familiar, come back. So in a way, this interim is a very interesting choice. One thing Billy Gonzalez has said is that they're going to try and do he didn't put it this way, I'll put it this way, the Urban Meyer thing of getting your playmakers the ball in space, which is something Billy Napier was not really great at. With that said, again, this is going to be a fun insight for the fans, or maybe not so much. We'll see. There are rumors out there, and I'll stress rumors, that Billy Napier, with everything he was doing as a head coach, may or may not have done much or done a whole lot in the game planning department. So that's why you'd see these scripted drives the first drive or two of the game where Florida comes out and looks amazing on offense, moves right down the field against Texas A&M and scores, Texas and scores, and several other games, just comes out, looks on fire, can't be stopped. And then after you get past the scripted drives, the offense just dies. And I was there at Kyle Field, and I go, oh, let's just, once we get to Billy play calling, past the scripted amount, it's going to be a pain. And sure enough, it was. And I bring that up simply to say it's going to be interesting now if those rumors are true. It's definitely true that these scripted drives were doing much better than once you got past them. If the rumors are true, you may see more of what Florida looked like consistently on those first few drives of games. And if you see that, I think this is a very dangerous Florida offense. It's what I thought it could be. Again, this is projection because that's all we have. We don't know. For all we know, we're going to come out and keep running the same 6 plays. But, you talked about your secondary. The Florida passing game has been generally awful this year. Some of that is DJ Lagway missing the entire offseason. Some of that, I do believe, is it's not the most QB-friendly offense. And once last year, teams figured out the secret hack of stopping DJ Lagway, which was go too deep and go to zone, because the offense wasn't built to beat it. You had lots of issues. The Texas game where we upset Texas, they ran lots of cover one man. And boy, did Florida make them pay for that. I mean, we shouldn't have had it come down to a sack on the last play of the game to close that out. But that's Billy Bingo that I referenced earlier. But anyways, there are 4 great receivers. If Vernell Brown III is healthy, that we could see on the field at the same time. Billy never put 4 on the field at the same time. I saw a rumor the other day. When I say rumor, this is coming from someone who's like, hey, I'm related to this walk-on. And again, you don't know if they are or not, but they're saying we may see some 4 receiver sets, which would be interesting. But you have Trey Wilson, who was a freshman All-American 2 years ago, was injured last year, did not play against Georgia. You have Aiden Mizell, who last year, got behind Georgia's defense when Florida did take the lead after that interception of Carson Beck, who, boy, is keeping up that interception record at Miami. Sorry, I had to. That's why he only threw the ball 11 yards down the field total against Florida. Of course, we couldn't stop them any other way. Dang, if we made them throw down the field, we'd probably win that game. Never mind. Our offense was terrible under Billy. But anyways, you got those 2, but then you have the dynamic freshman, Vernell Brown III, got injured against Mississippi State. There's not been a confirmation yet at the time of this recording, at least, of his, whether he's good to go against after the bye week against Georgia or not. And then you have freshman phenom Dallas Wilson, who missed the first 4 games of the season, and then he had a coming out party against Texas. Big receiver, strong receiver. I mean, there's the highlight of him catching the ball, going down the sideline, and he's basically dragging Taft from Texas, who I believe was some team All-SEC safety last year, dragging him into the end zone as Taft is just holding on to his ankle. And this is a guy that's only going to get better. Now, if you end up with a more diverse play calling set where you feature these 4 guys, especially you mentioned the DBs you're kind of worried about, that's something that could, if we can get a passing game going, it's going to open up room for Baugh. Baugh's on pace to be Florida's first 1,000-yard back in 9 or 10 years. So really looking forward to that. On the defensive side, and this is where it's possibly good news for Georgia, is that against Mississippi State, at one point, we were only playing 1 starter in the secondary. Of our 5 starters, the other 4 were injured. I don't know who may be back or who may not be back at this time. But with that said, overall, I mean, Shapen ended up at the end of the game throwing for 300 yards. with a few big plays there near the end. But overall, we found a safety who would come up and tackle behind the line, something our other safeties weren't doing too well. And Alfonso Allen, who before that Mississippi State game had 0 snaps on the year, he comes up and he's a redshirt senior. I'm pretty sure a former walk-on, comes up and he made several tackles for loss. So that's where it's like, okay, maybe this might be a good thing that he doesn't have much experience, because you're going to see stuff like a blown coverage like we saw a few times against Mississippi State, or a bad thing for Georgia in that, okay, where we might not have, had to worry about safeties coming down and tackling a running back behind the line. Now there's a guy that's doing that. You have 4-star freshman. I almost said Vernell Brown, because Vernell Brown, the receiver, his dad was a defensive back for Florida back in the Meyer years. Ben Hanks, Ben Hanks is, I believe he's junior, 4-star out there. Lagonza Hayward, who was a 4-star safety recruit last year. He was playing at the nickel position, some at the star position. And then, Showers, or Flowers. I said Showers because I think Valdez Showers, former Gator player, but Flowers, another freshman, was out there playing. All talented guys, but also true freshmen out there, and a former walk-on safety. So if that's a matchup that may help out Georgia, if it's not and we have some talent back, that could maybe hurt, but we will see. I do love our linebackers, our defensive line. The good news on that is we're going to have more depth than we did at Miami. At Miami, we missed, 4 of our 8 on the 2 deep. We're not going to be fully healthy, but we'll be a lot more healthy than we've been in several games. Of course, our big one for the year that we thought was going to be great, defensive tackle, and that is Banks. Came back from injury against LSU and then left with a season-ending injury against LSU. I think if Florida takes the lead, it might get very interesting in Jacksonville. But without knowing how this offense is going to look, it's kind of hard to predict. But as I have for years, I don't mind upsetting your fans by predicting a Florida win.
Sure.
I'll go with 20-17 in this one. I believe Trey Smack could hit a few 50-plus yard field goals as he did against Mississippi State, and that could be the difference. This defense is playing better at this point this year than they were last year, and it was a game for 4 quarters. I think if we see a little bit more dynamic offense, there's a chance, unlike playing our third string last year, who could barely complete a pass beyond 10 yards. It just is what it is. And unfortunately stunted what was a really good game. And I want to throw this out there. As you mentioned, it is the last game in Jacksonville for 3 years. Obviously next year, Atlanta, followed by Tampa. One thing I do find really disappointing is that this is not a home and home. I would love to go see Sanford Stadium for the first time, but I think we were kind of robbed there. But that's just my side thoughts. But yeah, 2017 Florida.
I appreciate that, Daniel, completely. Also, I agree with you on that. Home and home would have been great. Been great for Georgia fans to go to the Swamp for a reason. That's good. All right, so Wikipedia, Georgia leads 57-44-2. Georgia's won 4 of 5. Last loss was the 2020 season. You guys smoked us in. Georgia pulled away a little bit last year, but you guys had all the injuries at quarterback. This is going to be close, and I could even see Florida even getting up as usual. But Georgia is very resilient, second half team. They make adjustments. I could see it being, like I said, 10-7 at halftime at Florida winning. But I think Gunnar Stockton's hitting a stride. The O-line's healthy. You're going to get a heavy dose of Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier, and then our hammer is Josh McCray, who can really run the ball. Also, Georgia really good against the run. I think they're going to contain Ba, which I know he's explosive running back. It is the wild card. If you guys have explosive wide receivers, I can see it getting behind our secondary early. We don't have a pass rush. Not sure how good your O-line is. That's always a fear. I think Georgia's like in the last 10 in pass rush. That's always been an issue. Got a good kicker. I'm going to say Georgia gets a touchdown late because they got a little bit more talent. Rushing touchdown, and Georgia wins 27-21. They do not cover, but they win in a scrappy fight just because they are resilient and really turning on in the fourth quarter. But it's going to be a close game. Won't be a blowout for sure. This will be a competitive game. 27-21, Georgia.
Okay.
Also, appreciate coming on again, Daniel. How do we – oh, yeah, one last thing before we give you your shout-out on social media. Are we going to change the intro, Operation and Truth? Got Operation Truth. Got to tell the truth. Are we going to change that coming up now?
That's actually been changed. When I recorded my
I like it.
Yeah, for those that don't know what I was talking about, that Billy Napier quote from after when he beat Utah. He said that I'm driving, I'm listening to the presser the Monday after beating Utah. I'm listening to his Monday presser, and he says that. I'm like, that's the intro for the podcast, and that was the first year I did the podcast. But when I did the coaching search, I actually started to record and I heard that going. I said, oh no. So I stopped everything, found my music, re-upped everything. So if I release the coaching tree, which I might put a pull out on X later, it'll be the new intro. There's no voiceover or anything right now. I'll have to figure that out. But yeah, instead it's just my old band playing the same music that's been there, just a weird fade of the music coming up versus what it used to be.
Awesome. We'll look forward to that. Got you here on your YouTube, the Gator Truth. It's growing, over 300 subscribers. Also got you on Twitter here. How do we follow? Anything you want to add in on your social media?
Oh, I need to add more social media. Right now it's just the YouTube page where I do post some things from game days, and then also at Gator Podcast is my X or Twitter, whatever you'd like, which I need to post more on there outside of just episode announcements, but always like to have some fun. And then, it's going to be a fun time down in Jacksonville. And if you listen to the Doghouse and you see me, be sure to say hi, even if you end up barking in my face afterwards.
Yeah, we're being called the Bark Boys recently with the was that? I forget. Allstate? Was that Allstate or Progressive? Anyway, I forget what it is. Yeah, this guy's funny. It's good. Good shout out there. But yeah, check out Gator Truth on all social media. He's growing on YouTube and Twitter as well. And Daniel, where are you watching the game? You going to the game, or are you just going to stay home and watch it?
I will be there. It'll be my 48th straight Gator game. So
really, wow,
yes,
man, you're diehard.
Yep. 50th will be in Oxford, which has become an even more interesting trip over the last few weeks, as a war on X has broken out between the Ole Miss and Florida fan bases for who knows why.
Okay, interesting. Well, I hope it's a good trip for you, and appreciate you coming on again.
Always. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Make sure to like, subscribe, share the Doghouse podcast. We appreciate it.